Hello and welcome to Asian Girl Sits in a Chair. A while back I was having dinner with my friend and we got into a disagreement. It frustrated me more than anything that I couldn't articulate my objections to his obviously fallacious argument. Somehow the conversation got to him saying this statement. He said, slavery was moral back in the day because that was what was accepted during those times. Now this is an example of cultural relativism. And if you don't know what that is, I'll Google it for you. Cultural relativism is the principle that an individual's personal beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. So if that makes no sense, it basically means morality is determined by your culture. So whatever your culture believes and accepts is what is moral. Therefore, morality is subjective and there's no objective morality. There's no one set of moral rules that the whole world should follow. Now, I'm going to go through 4 objections. I try to keep these as clear and succinct as possible, but they're probably going to be very unorganized and confusing. But I'll try my best, okay? By the way, if I'm looking over here, it's because my notes are over here. I wrote down some notes to try and keep this video somewhat coherent. Objection 1. If there's 2 conflicting cultures, how can both of them be right? In that case, all the cultures in the world are right, according to cultural relativism. If all the cultures in the world are right, then nobody's wrong. In which case, there's no point in saying that you're right. Then nothing's right and nothing's wrong. Now, a cultural relativist may argue this point by saying that that's from the point of view of a net right or wrong. And by net right or wrong, I mean from the world as a whole, maybe each culture will cancel out and the whole world will be net of no wrong or right. Is that confusing? That's confusing. Sorry. But the net right or wrong doesn't matter because within each culture, they have their own definitions for what's good and what's bad. And that's independent to the culture next to them or the culture across the world. Which brings me to objection number 2. Everyone belongs to several cultures at once. Maybe you're vegan and a Satanist. Then how are you supposed to decide which culture to follow? This is the argument that I brought up with my friend while we were eating. And his response was, whichever culture is bigger and more dominant decides. My objection to that is, well, what gives a bigger culture more authority in determining morality? Is it that there's more people in that culture that all agree on one thing, therefore it promotes social cohesion? If that's the case, then you're saying that social cohesion justifies the acts of slavery. Which brings me to objection number 3. By giving a reason for morality other than it's just culture, you're being objective. So in that example that we just used about social cohesion justifying the acts of slavery, that's giving an objective reason. As soon as you start giving a reason, you're therefore giving logic, which therefore means that you're being objective. And to be a true relativist, you have to be tolerant of other cultures because all cultures are equal. But the act of saying that you should be tolerant of other cultures is in itself intrinsically objective. And that goes against cultural relativism, which is subjective. Now for my last objection, number 4, what is culture exactly? By beginning to define it, you begin to give reasons for morality. And again, the moment you start to give reasons, you're being logical, which in turn makes you objective, which goes against the subjective cultural relativism. Now, I'll be charitable and I'll ignore the fact that you're being objective. So let's go on. Let's try to define culture. So I would say a good definition for culture, especially in regards to what we're talking about right now, would be social acceptance. A collective agreement on a certain thing, a communal sharing of something, and in this case, a communal agreement on what morality should be. But then this argument is circular. By saying that social acceptance determines culture, and culture is what determines morality, and morality is determined by social acceptance, you just went full circle, and that's not a valid argument. So that's the end of my video. I lied. I have 2 more objections. Let's take a Socratic approach to this. So what makes you a person? Maybe the cultural relativist will say, well, because I'm a being of value. That's what makes me a person. And I would say, if that's the case, then is it true that all human beings have value? Then maybe they'll say, yes, all human beings have value. Then I would say, then by enslaving someone and taking away their value, wouldn't you be then admitting that you yourself don't have value? So by enslaving someone, you're hurting yourself. That was my attempt at Socratic reasoning. Another thing is back to the what is culture thing, but from a different perspective. Most of us are born into a certain culture. We don't make some kind of autonomous choice to be in it. Then how can you justify taking away the autonomy of someone who didn't choose to be in that culture? That's like saying that morality is based on luck. And if you're lucky to be born into the culture that is of higher position, then you get to maintain your autonomy and your freedom. Pretty much this would be the same as saying that it's okay to enslave someone because they have blue eyes. They didn't choose to have blue eyes. I'm sure I've made some kind of fallacies, so if I have, then feel free to point it out. It's not like cultural relativism is a very heavily contended issue. It's just fun to discuss sometimes. It frustrated me so much that I just couldn't express myself. I knew, obviously, that it was wrong that he believed that slavery was right or okay at any point in the past, present, or future. But, I mean, I gave some objections. They weren't good enough, though. He rebutted and I didn't know what to say. It frustrated me so much that in between my heart and my mouth, it just couldn't come out. It just didn't know. And then my brain, too, is just like, phew, I just didn't know how to do it. Which is why I tried to clearly organize my thoughts and write it out and make sure I know how to talk, because learning how to talk is a great thing. This, however, but then this argument